I stood frozen, my phone still buzzing in my hand as the message flashed across the screen. Due to limited seating, we regret to inform you that you are no longer on the guest list. My daughter-in-law's words cut through me like ice, and I waited for my son to call, to explain. But there was only silence. They didn't know. They didn't know that the hotel they'd chosen for their wedding, the one they'd spent months planning, was mine. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Victoria Lane stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her 12th floor oceanfront condo, the late afternoon sun spilling gold across the marble floors. The Atlantic shimmered, indifferent and endless. In her hand, her phone buzzed once, an innocuous ping. She glanced down, expecting a note from Gloria or Elena. Instead, it was an email. Subject: Wedding Update. Her brow furrowed. The sender: Sabrina Cole. No greeting, no warmth. Just cold digital type against a bright white screen. Due to limited seating and capacity restrictions, we've had to make some difficult cuts. Regretfully, you are no longer on the guest list. Thank you for understanding. That was it. No Victoria, not even a Mrs. Lane, no explanation, no apology, just dismissed. She read it again, and then again. Her breath caught, but she didn't let it out. Instead, she walked, slowly, deliberately, toward her sleek white sofa, sat down, and placed the phone on the glass coffee table like it might burn her if held too long. She waited for the follow-up. The call from her son, Andrew, explaining this was a mix-up, a mistake, something Sabrina sent without him knowing. But the phone stayed silent. Minutes passed. The waves rolled. The light changed. Still nothing. Victoria leaned back against the cushions, her spine rigid, hands folded in her lap like she was bracing for impact. It wasn't about the wedding. It was about the message. She was no longer useful, no longer included, no longer wanted. An hour later, Gloria arrived with a bottle of Pinot and a bag of lemon biscotti, her voice trailing in from the elevator vestibule. Tell me you're finally watching that awful dating show I told you about. She stopped mid-sentence the moment she stepped inside and saw Victoria's face. Gloria set the bottle down. What happened? Victoria said nothing. Just tilted her chin toward the phone still sitting on the coffee table like a live grenade. Gloria picked it up, read, and exploded. You've got to be kidding me. She tossed the phone back onto the table, pacing, hands slicing through the air. That entitled little gold digger? Limited seating? Victoria, you're the mother of the groom. You built his entire childhood with your bare hands after Richard died. And now you're cut like some distant acquaintance? Victoria didn't respond. Her gaze remained fixed on the horizon, watching the tide shift. I mean, what kind of sociopath does this? Gloria continued. And Andrew, he didn't call? He didn't even... She stopped again, watching her friend closely. He knows, doesn't he? Victoria finally turned, her voice soft. He does. The silence that followed was heavier than Gloria had expected. And he let it happen? Victoria's smile came then, elegant, precise, but her eyes shimmered with something ancient and bruised. Apparently, space is limited. Gloria folded herself onto the couch beside her, reaching for her hand. You are a better woman than me, because I would have driven to that girl's overpriced nail salon and dragged her across the counter. That pulled the smallest chuckle from Victoria. Would have paid to see that. Don't tempt me. Later that night, while the city pulsed under moonlight, Victoria scrolled through her feed. There Sabrina was, front and center, posing on the marble staircase of the Alden, one of the most exclusive properties in Florida. Her property. A caption under the filtered photo read, "Curating the most exclusive guest list for the event of the year. Bak Vibe only. Cost no plus ones. Bak luxury affair." Victoria's finger hovered over the image, then stilled. It wasn't just the caption. It was the dress. The smug, champagne-soaked confidence. The way Andrew stood beside her, chin raised like he belonged in this filtered fantasy. The ache hit low and deep, not sharp, but slow, like sinking into ice water. Her name hadn't even been mentioned. She didn't exist in this version of their lives. She closed the app, then opened her email. Composed a message. To Marcus Grant. Subject: Rental Contract Review. Marcus, I believe Sabrina booked the Alden for the wedding. Please forward me the agreement she signed and schedule a private call tomorrow. She hit send. Outside, the waves roared. Inside, the fire had just been lit. The Bentley moved in silence along Ocean Drive, the tinted windows filtering Miami's midday sun into a pale amber glow. Victoria sat poised in the back seat, one hand resting on the leather armrest, the other absently tracing the stitching in her gloves. Her driver knew not to speak unless spoken to. As they approached the Alden, the resort's signature white archways and sculpted fountains came into view, pristine, polished, and buzzing with movement. Planners and headsets darted between easels and floral arrangements. Trucks unloaded crates of champagne. A six-piece string quartet rehearsed softly under a linen canopy. And there she was. Sabrina, perched on the edge of the main terrace, clipboard in hand, directing staff like a queen preparing for coronation. Her voice cut through the air, sharp and performative. No, no, the orchids go on the left of the fountain. Do we have the platinum-rimmed chargers or not? Someone find the head server. I want to run the signature cocktail list again. She twirled in her designer heels, oblivious to the watching eyes, basking in the illusion that all of this, every detail, was hers to command. Victoria didn't move, didn't blink, just studied her through the glass like a curator inspecting a forged painting. She's enjoying herself, she murmured, almost to herself. The driver pulled into the private underground entrance. Inside, the lobby was cool and cathedral quiet. Everything smelled of eucalyptus and luxury. Guests had no idea a social minefield was being laid out above their heads. As Victoria stepped into the manager's wing, Elena Torres was already waiting. Impeccably dressed, tablet in hand, Elena closed the office door behind them and gave a small nod of deference. She's been in and out all week, Elena said, glancing toward the ceiling as if she could see the chaos above. Demanding early access, trying to micromanage my entire staff. Victoria slipped off her gloves, laying them neatly on the table. Does she know who owns the property? No. Elena smiled faintly. She thinks it's corporate, no names. She never asked. Victoria allowed herself a quiet breath. Marcus sent me the contract, Elena continued, pulling it up on the screen. Booked under Sabrina Cole and Andrew Lane, standard luxury package, no customization on ownership clauses. Victoria stepped forward. Clause 9C? Elena tapped, highlighted. All event activity is subject to approval by the property owner or its designated representative. Bookings may be modified or terminated at the sole discretion of ownership without liability. Perfect, Victoria said, studying the screen like a tactician reviewing a map. You could shut it all down today, Elena said gently. One signature and we cancel the floral contracts, the catering, the rooms, every last chair. Victoria turned toward the window that looked out over the resort's private gardens. A group of caterers was testing past hors d'oeuvres beneath palm fronds. The sun glinted off silver trays, laughter echoing faintly up through the glass. She tilted her head slightly. Her voice came quiet and composed, but deliberate. Not yet. Elena watched her, searching for a trace of malice, but found only control. Complete, elegant control. Understood. Victoria stepped back, collecting her gloves. Let her enjoy the rehearsal. The show hasn't started. Outside, as she exited through the discreet executive door, she paused just long enough to glance toward the upper terrace. Sabrina now posed for a photographer, chin tilted, her hand resting on Andrew's arm as if she'd sculpted him from marble. She laughed at something, loud and rehearsed. Staff moved around her with polite distance, nodding quickly, eyes lowered. Victoria studied the scene, then turned and walked to her car. The private dining room at Delmar, tucked behind smoked glass partitions and velvet curtains, buzzed with low jazz and flickering candlelight. Miami's elite filled the main restaurant beyond the curtain, but in here, the noise was distant, muted, irrelevant. Victoria, Gloria, and Marcus Grant sat around a round mahogany table set with porcelain dishes and crisp white linens. A waiter poured a deep red Bordeaux into Victoria's glass, then disappeared without a word. "I assume you've both seen the photos," Victoria said, her voice even as she reached for her glass. Gloria leaned in, already shaking her head. "The one where she's trying on that mermaid-cut atrocity that looks like it's suffocating her spleen?" Marcus smirked behind his whiskey glass. "Or the one where she's posing next to a velvet VIP seating-only sign like she's hosting the Met Gala?" Victoria gave a soft, elegant smile. "She's building a stage. I intend to let her." Gloria raised an eyebrow. "You're really letting this circus roll forward?" "I am," Victoria said, dabbing her napkin gently across her lips. "With one difference. This time, I'm choosing the curtain call." Marcus set down his drink. "I've reviewed every clause in the venue contract. It's ironclad. If you want the entire event paused, postponed, or publicly dismantled, you have that right. But something tells me you're not interested in making this quiet." "I'm not." Her voice didn't rise, but something sharpened beneath it. "I want her to believe she's won. I want every seating chart and floral arch to feed the illusion. And then, when everyone's watching, I want the truth to rearrange the room." Gloria gave a delighted gasp and clapped once. "Victoria Lane, this will be the performance of the year." Marcus smiled without warmth. "You don't need theatrics. You just need timing." Victoria turned toward him. "That's why you're here." He nodded, pulling a slim leather folder from his briefcase and laying it between the candles. "The transfer authorizations are ready. Elena has full operational clearance at the Alden. You'll have final say on everything, from vendor access to the guest list." Gloria leaned over, peering at the papers. "How much are you betting Sabrina doesn't realize she gave the entire production to the one woman she disinvited?" "She doesn't read what doesn't flatter her," Victoria said calmly. "That makes her predictable and easy to corner." A flicker of something, amusement, admiration, passed between the three. Victoria's phone buzzed quietly on the table. Andrew. Another text. This one just said, "Hope you're well. Things are busy." She didn't respond. She didn't delete it either. Gloria glanced over. "Let me guess. More half-hearted breadcrumbs from your son?" Victoria lifted her glass again. "He's either afraid to face me or ashamed to admit he's afraid." Marcus spoke gently. "There may come a time he realizes what he's lost." "And I'll be exactly where I've always been," Victoria said, but far less forgiving. Later that night, back in her condo, she sat by the windows again, phone in hand, watching Miami glitter below like scattered diamonds. Sabrina's latest post lit up her feed. "Custom couture fitting with my girls today. Can't wait to see my VIP section sparkle. Just talking bride boss, talk no mothers. In law allowed." The photo showed Sabrina standing in front of a mirrored wall, arms lifted like royalty, attendants kneeling around her, pinning the edges of a gown that looked more pageant than bridal. The caption was poison, wrapped in sequins. Victoria's lips curled upward, not in pain this time, but in the cool, clean satisfaction of watching a fuse inch toward flame. The morning sun filtered through soft linen drapes in Victoria's study, casting long amber stripes across the polished oak desk. Her fingers moved deliberately, flipping through the thick packet Marcus had messengered over that morning. The event rental agreement was printed on heavy paper, the kind designed to feel expensive. She didn't need to read it. She had written half the language herself, back when the Alden first opened its doors. But still, she read every word like it was a personal letter. Lessee acknowledges that the owner retains full authority over any and all alterations, cancellations, and access permissions. She paused, lightly underlining the sentence with a gold Mont Blanc. Clause 14c, buried in legalese. The silent dagger. Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Across the city, at the Alden, Elena Torres moved through the banquet hall like a conductor. A clipboard rested in one arm, the other issued subtle signals to staff who responded without question. Inside the ballroom, a pair of decorators were draping tulle from the vaulted ceiling when she approached. "Eliminate the white lilies from the centerpieces," she murmured to the florist. "Mrs. Lane prefers garden roses. Champagne blush." The florist blinked. "But Ms. Cole?" "Champagne blush," Elena repeated coolly. "Per the ownership's directive." No one pushed back. A server approached with a question about the tasting menu. Elena answered it smoothly, then turned to the kitchen staff. "Also, remove that signature drink from the cocktail hour. Replace it with the rosemary pear martini, Mrs. Lane's favorite." Every detail was shifting. Quietly. Invisibly. No one in Sabrina's orbit had noticed the sand shifting under her stilettoed feet. That evening, Marcus arrived at Victoria's condo carrying a bottle of Sonoma Brut and a smirk. "She signed it without question," he said, dropping his briefcase onto the coffee table. "Didn't consult a lawyer, didn't ask for revisions, didn't even skim the clauses." Victoria arched an eyebrow. "And Andrew?" Too busy worrying about the font size on the invitations to notice he just handed over the entire event to his mother. Victoria gave a soft hum of acknowledgement. "Poetic." He poured 2 glasses and handed her one. "To contractual negligence." She took a sip, crisp, cold, satisfying. Later that night, Gloria arrived in a silk robe and messy bun, balancing a tray of chocolate truffles and gossip magazines. "Elena's working like a ghost," she announced, flopping onto the chaise, shifting every flower, every table layout, every menu card, without Sabrina noticing a thing. "I swear she's a magician." Victoria handed her a glass of champagne. "She's efficient and discreet." "Oh, she's more than discreet," Gloria said, taking a long sip. "She's lethal." She flipped open a magazine and waved a hand toward a photo. "Did you see this one? Sabrina doing press in front of your hotel like she's some kind of influencer princess?" Victoria didn't look. She didn't need to. "She wants to be envied." Gloria smirked. "She's about to be educated." The next morning, Victoria walked the perimeter of the Alden's oceanfront terrace. Staff nodded to her with subtle deference, each more respectful than the last. From the upper level, Sabrina's voice carried faintly down through the breeze. "I said no circular tables. I hate circular tables. They make the photos look cheap." Victoria paused by the hedges, unseen, and watched her. Sabrina waved her arms as if casting a spell, completely unaware that every table she was complaining about had been personally approved by the real owner. Every time she tried to seize control, she tightened the noose. Victoria stood at her kitchen counter, the stainless steel espresso machine humming behind her as she scrolled through her phone. A list opened. Names from another time, another version of her life. The kind of people who had sent hand-addressed sympathy cards when Richard died. The kind who remembered Andrew as a boy in bow ties and sneakers. She selected 6, then 4 more. Paused. Added 2 judges, a former state senator, and the daughter of her late husband's business partner. Old friends, quiet allies, loyal witnesses. With a final glance, she forwarded the list to Elena, accompanied by a short message. Please extend a personal invitation. Kindly avoid public RSVP channels. Thank you. She set the phone down, took a sip of coffee, and exhaled slowly. Let the real guest list begin. At the Alden, Sabrina twirled in front of the ballroom's ornate mirrors, holding up a fabric swatch against the lavender lighting. Too mauve, she muttered to herself. I want opulence, not Easter brunch. Behind her, a young assistant hovered with a seating chart. We need confirmation on the top table, Ms. Cole, and the overflow for VIP Rao. Sabrina didn't even look up. Keep the influencers close to the photographers. Put anyone over 50 near the kitchen doors. And if you see the words family friend on anything, move them to the back. But we haven't seen RSVP confirmations from Andrew's mother's side. She's not coming, Sabrina snapped. She wasn't invited. Focus on the people who matter. She turned, admiring her reflection. This is my moment. Meanwhile, in a quiet back office of the hotel, Elena clicked open the latest RSVP file. All green. The Chamber of Commerce president, Victoria's old neighbors from Coral Gables, the estate attorney whose wife had hosted fundraisers for the governor, and just added that morning, Mayor Thomas Bexley, plus his wife, plus 2 council members. Elena blinked, then smiled. She picked up the phone. Back at Victoria's penthouse, Gloria dropped onto the couch holding a mocktail and a tablet glowing with social media tabs. She's up to 9 posts today, she said. #count, 23. My personal favorite? She tapped and read aloud, smirking. Curating a guest list is like curating your life. Not everyone belongs in your inner circle. A list only, curated excellence. Victoria didn't even glance up from her tea. She's mistaking exclusivity for importance. Gloria grinned, and she's doing it loud enough for the entire city to hear. She's setting herself up beautifully. Victoria's phone buzzed. A message from Elena. Wanted to flag? Mayor has RSVP'd? Yes. Confirmed he received your personal invitation. Victoria paused, then typed. Wonderful. Let me know if the city council's attending as well. Gloria peeked over her shoulder. Wait. Mayor Bexley? Victoria met her eyes calmly. The very one who presented Richard with the Business Legacy Award. Gloria blinked. He hasn't attended a private wedding in years. You invited him? I didn't invite him to a wedding, Victoria replied, folding her napkin. I invited him to a lesson. Across town, in their sleek downtown condo, Andrew and Sabrina stood in front of a giant whiteboard covered in guest names, swatches, logos, and a printed seating map. Andrew pinched the bridge of his nose. Are we really pushing out my Aunt Diane for an Instagram chef you've never met in person? Sabrina rolled her eyes. She'd ask for a low-sodium plate and make everything awkward. This is not a family reunion, Andrew. She raised me when Mom worked doubles, he said, more to himself than to her. Sabrina had already moved on. And just so we're aligned, I've tightened press access. I'm not letting anyone in who doesn't elevate the event's brand. Andrew glanced at the empty slot labeled Mother of the Groom. Blank. Still blank. He swallowed. Did you hear if my mom's? She's not coming. Let it go. The wedding morning dawned sharp and electric, the kind of Miami day that looked plucked from a travel brochure. Azure skies, salt-laced air, and sun that gilded everything it touched. By 10 a.m., The Alden's beachfront lawn had been transformed into a vision of manicured extravagance. Rows of pale gold chairs curved in perfect symmetry facing the ocean, hemmed by towering floral arches. White hydrangeas, orchids, and roses bloomed in imported stone urns. Crystal lanterns swayed in the breeze, catching light like prisms. At the back of the aisle, Sabrina Cole stood flanked by two stressed planners and a clipboard. Wearing a silk robe that screamed exclusive. Her phone was in one hand, a champagne flute in the other. "Ushers need to tighten security at the boardwalk entrance," she barked. "No walk-ins, no surprise plus ones, no family friends unless they're on the list. I don't care if they carried Andrew to soccer practice. If they're not confirmed, they don't get in." A planner hesitated. "And, if Victoria Lane arrives?" Sabrina paused, smiled coldly. "Escort her off the property, politely but firmly." An hour later, a sleek black car rolled down the private service lane beside the Alden. It stopped near the executive kitchen entrance. Unmarked, discreet. The back door opened and Victoria Lane stepped out, the hem of her dove-gray silk dress catching in the breeze. No flashy jewelry, no entourage. Just Elena Torres, walking beside her with quiet confidence, tablet in hand. From the shadows beneath the catering tent, two servers paused, then quickly dipped their heads. "That's her," one whispered. "The owner," the other murmured, straightening his vest. The ripple spread like static through the staff. No announcement was needed, no introduction. The weight of who she was filled the space like gravity. As guests began to arrive, the usual murmurs filled the air. Compliments on the florals, speculation about the menu, whispers about which influencer had RSVP'd and who was rumored to have been cut. Then, a hush. Victoria emerged onto the path leading to the ceremony lawn. Her gown was simple but masterfully cut. High neckline, fitted waist, floor-length silk that moved like liquid silver. A pair of low nude heels, a single diamond at her ear. No logos, no glitter. Just presence. She didn't rush. She didn't hide. She walked with a composure that made onlookers part without being asked. One by one, the guests began to notice. Heads turned, eyebrows raised. A few gasped. "Is that?" "Oh my God, that's her!" A well-known attorney from Coral Gables stepped forward. "Victoria, you look radiant." She smiled with polite warmth. "Thank you, Peter. Lovely to see you." A city councilwoman kissed her cheek. "You haven't aged a day. This view suits you." Even the mayor, already seated with his wife, stood as Victoria approached. "Mrs. Lane," he said, voice low and full of respect. "Thank you for inviting us." "It's a pleasure," Victoria said. "Enjoy the view." Across the lawn, Sabrina caught a flash of movement out of the corner of her eye. She turned, mid-laugh, her hand still wrapped around Andrew's forearm. Her smile froze. There, walking past the first row of seats as if she'd been born to own them, was Victoria, greeting guests, exchanging handshakes, absorbing the space without taking it. Sabrina blinked, her breath catching in her throat. "What the?" she whispered. Her gaze darted to the nearest planner. "Who let her in?" The planner looked pale. She came through the staff entrance, with Elena Torres." "Elena?" Sabrina's voice hitched. "Why is she even here today?" The planner swallowed hard. "She's the regional director. She's overseeing the event." Sabrina's hand tightened on the clipboard until the edge cut into her palm. "Why does everyone keep bowing to that woman like she's—" She stopped herself. Andrew followed her gaze, lips parting slightly when he saw his mother smiling at a pair of guests. Calm, radiant, unbothered. He didn't speak, because deep down, part of him knew. A soft string quartet began to play, the opening notes drifting across the ocean breeze like falling petals. The sun hung perfectly above the horizon, bronzing the scene in romantic warmth. Every detail, the seating, the florals, the lighting, was flawless. On the aisle, the guests quieted, all eyes forward. Sabrina stepped out first, radiant in her designer gown, the skirt flowing behind her like a silken wave. Her smile was dazzling, camera-ready. But her eyes, those glittering, narrowed eyes, searched until they found Victoria, seated in the front row, second chair in from the aisle. Victoria didn't flinch, didn't shift. She simply tilted her chin and met her future daughter-in-law's gaze with a calm that sliced deeper than outrage ever could. Sabrina's lips twitched slightly, her smile faltering for half a second before she corrected it. More teeth, less warmth. The music swelled. Andrew waited beneath the floral arch, flanked by groomsmen in tailored linen suits, sweat beginning to darken the collar of his. His face was taut, smile polite but tight, hands flexing nervously at his sides. He caught sight of his mother. She looked serene, composed, even elegant, exactly how he remembered her before things got complicated. He looked away quickly, the guilt rushing in like tide water. Gloria leaned over and whispered to Victoria without taking her eyes off the ceremony. If she glares any harder, she's going to melt the ring bearer. Victoria's lips barely moved, but a chuckle vibrated in her chest. It was the first real laugh since this charade began. Gloria sipped from her flute. You could have burned the place down, but instead, you chose front row seats. Let her have her moment, Victoria murmured back. We're not even at intermission yet. The ceremony continued. A young officiant, clearly handpicked for his Instagram-friendly aesthetic, stepped forward and welcomed the crowd with overly rehearsed charm. We gather here today under the open sky, the sound of waves behind us, and love in front of us. Victoria barely heard the words. She watched Sabrina instead. How tightly she gripped Andrew's hand, how often her smile faltered when the crowd glanced her way, but then turned back toward Victoria instead. Because they weren't just watching a wedding, they were watching her. The woman who wasn't invited, who still arrived. The woman whose grace unnerved. The woman Sabrina didn't know she was building this whole production on. Sabrina turned slightly as the officiant asked her to begin her vows. She launched into them with dramatic pauses, well-timed smiles, and too many adjectives. Andrew stood there, expression unreadable, hands still trembling slightly. I promise to elevate your life, Sabrina said breathily, the way you've elevated mine, to build a brand together, a future of curated joy. Gloria coughed under her breath. She sounds like a lifestyle blog. Victoria's smile barely twitched. Sabrina wrapped up with a deep inhale and a glance around the crowd, as if daring them to applaud. They didn't. Not yet. Andrew's turn. He cleared his throat and looked down at his cue card. I promise to support your dreams, he said, to stand by your side, to protect our image. Life. Our life together. His eyes flicked toward Victoria for the briefest moment, long enough to sting. She didn't blink, but her jaw tightened. The officiant declared them husband and wife, and the guests finally clapped, some louder than others, a smattering of polite cheers, a few forced smiles, but most clapped for the spectacle, not the union. The Alden's grand ballroom shimmered like a jewel box cracked open at twilight. Massive crystal chandeliers poured soft golden light over cream-colored walls lined with orchids and mirrors. A live jazz trio played near the stage, the notes so smooth they felt like they were stirring the air itself. Guests flowed into the reception, cheeks flushed with champagne and sun. Servers in white gloves offered trays of miniature crab cakes, rosé and hand-blown flutes, and bite-sized filet on porcelain spoons. In the center of it all stood Sabrina, radiant and breathless, as if she were floating on applause. Oh my God! She beamed to a small circle of influencers and minor celebrities. Is this not the most stunning reception Miami's seen this year? I mean, look at those uplights. Those are imported. I flew in a lighting consultant from Aspen. Someone clapped. Someone else complimented the champagne. A few nodded like bobbleheads. Victoria stood at the far end of the room near the arched windows, a champagne flute balanced between her fingers, quietly observing. She wore the same understated elegance as before, no need to compete with sequins or spectacle. She didn't chase attention. It came to her. One by one, staff drifted toward her with subtle gestures of respect. A waiter adjusted a nearby chair for her without being asked. The lead event planner bowed his head slightly as he passed. A chef in crisp whites delivered a tray of handmade truffles to her table with a quiet, "These are from the kitchen, Mrs. Lane," on the house. Across the room, Andrew noticed. He watched his mother receive more warmth from the staff in 5 minutes than Sabrina had in 5 days. Watched how guests who'd barely smiled at his bride leaned in to whisper softly with Victoria. Grateful, curious, impressed. And suddenly, the room felt off-kilter. He tugged at his tie, loosening it. The champagne in his glass no longer tasted celebratory. "Excuse me," he muttered, stepping away from a group of groomsmen as Sabrina posed with someone from a lifestyle magazine. At Victoria's table, Gloria sat with a sly grin, swirling her wine. "You see the tension starting to pull, don't you?" "I do," Victoria replied, calm as ever. "The bride's smile is cracking like cheap foundation," Gloria whispered. "And Andrew? That poor boy's sweating through his inheritance." Victoria let her gaze drift toward the head table where Sabrina stood beneath a spotlight. Glass raised, commanding silence with a flick of her manicured hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sabrina said, her voice already reaching for the rafters, "I just want to take a moment to say how grateful we are. Every detail you see tonight, from the flowers to the lighting to the 5-tier cake, it's all been a reflection of love, of taste, of vision." Applause. Polite, not thunderous. Sabrina lifted her glass higher. "To building the life we deserve, one curated moment at a time." A few cheers. Mostly clinks. Someone coughed. She turned to Andrew and leaned in for a kiss, but his lips barely met hers before he turned back to his glass. From her table, Victoria watched it all, like the final scene of a movie that didn't realize it had already ended. As the music resumed and Sabrina disappeared into another circle of admirers, Gloria leaned in again. "Enjoy the calm before the storm," she murmured. Victoria's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Oh, Gloria, this is the storm." The jazz trio faded out as dessert was being served. Delicate spun sugar towers atop velvet mousse, artfully arranged on chilled porcelain. Conversation softened to a murmur, champagne slowed to sips, and a sense of expectation began to hum beneath the candlelight. At the head table, Sabrina beamed, cheeks glowing, eyes scanning the room like a pageant winner surveying her kingdom. Her posture was perfect, her nails flawless. Everything, she believed, was going exactly as it should. Then the lights shifted subtly, dimming just enough to signal something was coming. The jazz trio stepped aside. The DJ cued a soft orchestral swell, and from a corner podium near the dance floor, Mayor Thomas Bexley stepped into the light. Polite applause rippled through the room. Sabrina's eyes lit up. She leaned toward Andrew, stage whispering through her smile. "I told you inviting the mayor would pay off." Andrew just nodded. But his eyes were locked on his mother across the room, still seated, still poised, still watching. Mayor Bexley raised his hand for quiet. "Good evening, everyone." The room fell still. "I've attended many beautiful events in my time," he began, voice rich and measured. "But tonight stands apart. not just for its elegance or the remarkable attention to detail, but for the woman whose vision and generosity made this evening possible. Sabrina's smile widened. She subtly adjusted her neckline, prepared to stand. The mayor continued. I'm honored to acknowledge the true patron behind tonight's celebration. A few guests began to murmur. Chairs shifted. Eyes turned. Sabrina inhaled, rising half an inch from her chair. And then, Mrs. Victoria Lane, the mayor said clearly, owner of the Alden Hotel and founder of the Lane Luxury Collection, which includes every venue hosting this celebration. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then, applause. Loud, genuine, immediate. Heads turned toward Victoria. Cameras clicked. Phones rose. Someone at a back table stood to clap. Even the servers paused, unsure if they should continue pouring. Sabrina's face went slack. Andrew's jaw clenched. At her table, Gloria burst into a slow clap, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier light like sparks. Oh, that's the good stuff, she whispered. Sabrina didn't move, didn't blink. She was still half standing, caught mid-motion in a pose meant for praise that never came. The mayor gestured toward the table where Victoria sat. If you'd be willing, Mrs. Lane, he said warmly, we'd be honored if you said a few words. Victoria didn't hesitate. She rose, graceful, unhurried, and passed her empty glass to a waiting server without a word. The crowd parted as she moved toward the podium. Not because they were asked, but because they felt they should. She took the microphone with one hand and placed the other gently against the carved wood of the stand. Her voice, when it came, was calm, centered, laced with something deeper than charm. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you truly to all of you, friends, colleagues, family, for being here tonight. Her eyes swept the crowd, but not with hunger, with clarity. This property has been my home in many ways. It was the first project Richard and I built together after he retired. He chose the stones for the foundation himself. The ballroom you're sitting in was designed with our anniversary in mind. A pause. The room leaned in. We've hosted diplomats, musicians, charities, but tonight's event is especially meaningful. Not because it's a wedding, though we wish the couple happiness, but because it reminds us that legacy isn't something you hand out. It's something you build. Sabrina's lips parted, but no sound came. Her hand tightened around her fork. Across the room, Andrew stared at his mother. Not with resentment, but something closer to recognition. And shame. Victoria's gaze never landed directly on them, but her presence filled the space between them like wind through glass. The ballroom hung in hushed suspension, the kind of stillness that feels ceremonial, not born of silence, but of attention. At the podium, Victoria Lane stood poised under the soft gleam of the chandelier's gold cascade, the microphone gently cradled in her hand. She scanned the faces before her, some curious, some starstruck, a few suddenly unsure of everything they thought they knew. Tonight, she began, voice smooth as silk ribbon, is about celebration. A pause, soft nods, glasses stilled in midair. Celebration of love, yes, but also of legacy, of community, of connection. These walls, she gestured with a quiet sweep of her hand, have held memories from every walk of life, philanthropists, politicians, newlyweds, survivors. From the back, one of the executive chefs stepped just inside the doorway, apron still on, arms folded with quiet reverence. A few of the servers lined the far wall, standing straight, listening. Victoria continued. None of this exists, this beauty, this harmony, without the staff behind it. They are the heart of this hotel, the hands that make every moment unforgettable. Scattered applause began, then grew. Sabrina's eyes narrowed. Next to her, Andrew shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing toward the exits, then toward his mother. He looked like a man trying to find a lifeboat on dry land. Victoria smiled warmly and lifted a hand to settle the applause. It's easy to credit the chandelier, the marble floors, or even the flowers. But what you're really experiencing tonight is care, hundreds of hours of it. Thoughtfulness, precision, and quiet dignity. The staff clapped then, loudest of all. Sabrina clenched her champagne glass tighter, the stem trembling in her hand. Her face locked in a smile she could no longer control. Gloria, seated now in the front row, gave a small, proud sigh and leaned back in her chair like she'd just finished a 7-course meal. And then, Victoria took it further. Many of you know my late husband, Richard Lane, helped build the foundation of this brand with me, but few know the full story. When he passed, I nearly sold this hotel. I thought it might be easier to let go than to stand here without him. The room went quiet again. The music had stopped completely now. Even the DJ stood motionless. Victoria's voice softened, but did not waver. But Richard's name is woven into every part of this place. So instead of selling it, I chose to honor him. She reached into the podium drawer and pulled out a simple gold envelope. Her hands didn't shake. Tonight, in his memory, I'm announcing the creation of the Richard Lane Foundation, which will fund hospitality scholarships for underprivileged students across the state of Florida, beginning with a $1.2 million endowment. A stunned pause. Then the room erupted. Applause. Cheers. Even the mayor stood to clap. Victoria stepped back slightly, letting the moment bloom around her. People wiped at the corners of their eyes. Some clinked glasses. Others reached for their phones. But not Sabrina. Sabrina sat frozen, hand clenched so tightly around her glass that a thin crack formed in the crystal stem. She said nothing, smiled at no one, because in a single moment, her carefully curated illusion had been drowned out by something she could neither copy nor control. Grace. Andrew didn't clap. He just looked down at his lap, jaw tight, cheeks flushed. Beside him, Gloria was already standing, clapping, face glowing with uncontainable pride. The ballroom buzzed like a stirred hive, guests whispering behind napkins, phones lighting up with group chats, heads turning and returning to confirm what they thought they'd just heard. Did she say owns the hotel? I thought it was a family donation or a sponsor thing. No, she owns it, the entire chain. I've stayed at Lane Properties in Aspen and San Diego. A ripple moved through the room, not of scandal, but revelation, like everyone had been part of a very expensive play without realizing who'd written the script. At the head table, Sabrina's face had gone pale beneath her expertly applied makeup. She blinked rapidly, mouth slightly open, hands trembling just enough to betray her carefully engineered posture. Then, barely above a whisper, she said it. She's lying. Andrew glanced at her, startled. Sabrina stood abruptly, her voice rising now. She's not the owner. That's not true. She can't be. She's not even on the guest list. A few heads turned her way. Sabrina. Andrew muttered under his breath, but she was already stepping away from the table, clutching her clutch like it could anchor her. She turned toward the podium, but Victoria was gone. The DJ tried to reintroduce music. Something light, elegant. But the room didn't follow. Attention still crackled in the air. And then came the voice that cut through it all. Elena Torres, standing tall and composed near the back corner, stepped up to the auxiliary mic. Cool professionalism wrapped around every word. For anyone unsure, she said evenly, I can confirm, on behalf of Lane Hospitality Group, that Mrs. Victoria Lane is the sole majority owner of this property, as well as the shoreline, the Astoria, and the entire Alden collection across the U.S. Sabrina turned sharply. Elena met her gaze and added smoothly, The bride signed the contract herself. Clause 14C, page 4. Gasps. Laughter. Someone near the bar clapped once, surprised, then stopped, embarrassed. Sabrina's face went crimson. She turned, heels clicking too hard against the ballroom floor, pushing through stunned guests and staff who subtly stepped aside, not out of politeness, but pity. Her voice cracked as she muttered, "Excuse me, I need a moment." She disappeared into the corridor, disappearing behind the gilded door marked powder room. Andrew hesitated for a beat, then stood too, buttoning his jacket out of instinct. He caught his mother's gaze across the ballroom. She didn't look surprised or smug, just calm. A woman who had known this moment would come. He nodded once at her, almost a bow, and followed his wife. Inside the powder room, Sabrina gripped the marble sink with both hands, her reflection blurry through the storm of humiliation pressing against her skull. She planned this. She whispered to no one. She waited for this. Behind her, the door creaked. Andrew stepped in, quiet, unsure. "Sabrina." "She let me walk through her halls like I owned them," she spat, spinning to face him. "She watched me run tastings and fittings and walkthroughs like I mattered." Andrew didn't respond. "She's been behind this entire thing, this entire show, like some twisted queen watching her court perform for her." Andrew lowered his eyes. "Maybe. We should talk outside." But she wasn't listening anymore. She was unraveling. Back in the ballroom, Victoria sat at her table once again. Champagne in hand, elbows relaxed. Her posture spoke not of conquest, but of confirmation. Gloria returned with 2 small chocolate tarts on a plate. "Bathroom sprint," she said, raising an eyebrow. "I'm giving it 10 minutes before someone leaks it to the Herald." Victoria gave the faintest shrug. It was never about embarrassing her. "No," Gloria said, "but it is about reminding people who built the stage she's pretending to dance on." Victoria raised her glass slightly, but didn't toast. She didn't need to. The office of Marcus Grant sat high above downtown Miami, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Biscayne Bay. The city moved below in its usual rhythm, cars navigating morning traffic, boats slicing through the water, sunlight pouring like syrup over the skyline. Inside, however, the mood was deliberate, quiet, and final. Victoria sat in a soft leather chair across from Marcus's oak desk, dressed in a tailored navy sheath and a string of pearls that had belonged to her mother. Her posture, as always, was straight, but not rigid. She exuded stillness, not tension. In front of her, the final draft of her revised will and estate plan rested on heavy cream-colored paper inside a navy folder. The Lane family crest embossed in gold. "This version reflects every directive you gave," Marcus said, adjusting his reading glasses. His voice was low and measured, the cadence of someone who had been handling weighty decisions for decades. "Sabrina is removed entirely. No residuals, no conditions. Andrew's share has been amended to a conditional trust, performance-based, with quarterly evaluations overseen by the Foundation Board." Victoria nodded once, her eyes scanning the paragraphs with calm precision. Her thumb rested on the corner of the document, but she didn't flip the page yet. She allowed herself a moment to sit with the gravity of what she was about to do, not out of doubt, but because she respected the finality of it. "Remind me about the new distribution percentages," she said softly, not looking up. Marcus tapped the page with a gold Mont Blanc pen. 30% to the Lane Foundation, 25% to local charities, housing, education, domestic violence shelters, another 20% to fund the hospitality scholarships in Richard's name. The remaining 25% is what Andrew may access, if, and only if, he fulfills the conditions we discussed. There's a clause built in for regular reviews and full retraction if necessary. Victoria gave the faintest nod. "Good. I want the money to do something better than sit in curated bank accounts. She paused, then reached for the pen. There was no hesitation in the signature she gave. 3 clean strokes, elegant and firm. With that single gesture, the years of tolerance, of measured silence, of giving too much benefit of the doubt were placed where they belonged, in the past. Done, she said, placing the pen down with delicate finality. Marcus slid the document aside with a kind of reverence. You just rewrote the ending, Victoria. At that, a door opened and Gloria entered, carrying a large iced coffee in one hand and a folder full of magazines in the other. I signed a parking slip downstairs, so I expect to be compensated in chocolate, she said, setting her purse down before easing into the chair beside Victoria. What's left for me? Page 7, Marcus said, handing her a separate form. Witness line. She flipped to the page, signed with a practiced flourish, then leaned back, examining Victoria with sharp but affectionate eyes. Well, that's it then, Gloria said. No more waiting for people to apologize. No more rewriting yourself to be included. Victoria offered a small smile. No more contingency planning for people who don't value what was built. Gloria's voice softened. You feel lighter. I can see it in your face. I am lighter, Victoria said, because I stopped letting disappointment sit at my table and pretend to be loyalty. Marcus cleared his throat, carefully organizing the signed documents into a sealed envelope. The label, printed in neat serif font, read, Last Will and Testament, Victoria Elaine Lane. Effective. Immediately, by the time they stepped out into the late morning sun, the wind off the bay had picked up slightly. Gloria linked arms with Victoria as they exited the marble lobby, her tone lighter than it had been in weeks. So what do you want to do to celebrate? Spa, champagne brunch. We could have matching silk robes monogrammed with, I told you so. Victoria let out a quiet laugh, the kind that came not from amusement but from release. I want to go home, sit with my coffee, and enjoy knowing that I own my peace now, in writing. They reached the curb where her town car waited, engine already running. The driver stepped out to open the door, but Victoria paused. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was rushing toward the next thing. She felt resolved. She turned to Gloria. He'll call soon. Gloria raised an eyebrow. And? I'll listen, Victoria said, but I won't bend. The morning after the wedding, Miami was already buzzing. Not with praise for the dress, or the vows, or the decor, but with the speech, the reveal. The moment the bride learned the ballroom she flaunted didn't belong to her. By 9 a.m., the footage had made its way to social media. A clip of the mayor introducing Victoria Lane. Another of Victoria's poised, heartfelt speech. Her final line about legacy had already been quoted on 3 hospitality blogs and reposted with captions like, When the real owner shows up, you sit down and take notes. A masterclass in grace and ownership. Mrs. Victoria Lane, we salute you. Even the staff had shared candid photos. Victoria shaking hands with longtime employees, smiling with a tray of champagne behind her, standing beneath the Lane crest with quiet confidence. One picture, taken by a server, had gone viral by noon. Sabrina mid-blink, her expression caught in perfect disbelief, while Victoria stood behind her, just entering the ballroom, head held high, flawless and unbothered. The caption read, When the real guest of honor arrives. You earned the list, but you owned the room. Back at the penthouse suite of the Alden, Sabrina Cole Lane sat on the edge of the hotel bed, still in a silk robe with the monogrammed initials that no longer felt like hers. Her phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand, but she didn't reach for it. The group chat with her bridesmaids had gone quiet. Her publicist had sent 3 texts advising a temporary media cleanse. Even the florist had posted a cryptic message on Instagram about integrity in business partnerships. The humiliation had spread faster than the champagne ever did. Andrew stepped out of the bathroom, still in dress pants, shirt half unbuttoned. He looked exhausted, not from celebration, but from the fallout. "I told them we'd check out early," he said quietly. Sabrina didn't answer. "You haven't said a word since last night," he added. She finally turned, eyes glassy and cold. "You knew." He blinked. "What?" "You knew she owned the hotel," she said, voice rising like steam. "You knew, and you let me plan my own humiliation." "I didn't," he said honestly. "Not at first, but I figured it out eventually." "When?" she snapped. Andrew hesitated. "A few weeks ago." She laughed, dry, bitter. "And you didn't stop me?" He sat on the armrest of a nearby chair, rubbing his hands together slowly. "What would have changed? You wouldn't have listened. You don't listen to anyone unless they flatter you." Wow. She stood now, her robe shifting around her like a warning. "So now I'm the villain because your mother decided to hijack our wedding?" "She didn't hijack it," he said. "She owned it." That landed. And it stung. Hours later, Victoria sat in the courtyard of her Brickell condo, the late sun falling between the leaves of the ficus trees, her coffee cooling beside her untouched. She was reading when she heard the intercom buzz. It was Andrew. When he stepped into the courtyard, he looked smaller. Not physically, but emotionally. Less composed, less armored. He took off his sunglasses, tucking them into his pocket, as if that might somehow make him more honest. She didn't rise. Just closed her book and looked up at him with the same patience she used to give him as a child, when he came home bruised from the playground but refused to admit he'd been pushed. "I've been getting messages all day," he said. "I imagine so," she replied. "They're calling it your wedding now. Articles, blogs, tweets. Everyone thinks it was some kind of revenge." "It wasn't," she said evenly. "Then why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked slightly. "Why didn't you warn me?" Victoria was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because if I had told you everything, you would have only listened with your wallet. Not your heart." Andrew's face twisted in confusion. She went on. "And I needed you to learn that respect doesn't come from money. It comes from how you show up when no one's watching. How you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you." He sat down slowly across from her, elbows on knees. "She lost her mind last night," he said. "She screamed in the hallway, said I betrayed her, said I embarrassed her." Victoria's tone didn't waver. "She embarrassed herself." There was a long pause, broken only by the rustling of palm fronds and the faint sound of traffic in the distance. Then Andrew spoke again, this time softly, as if even saying it aloud might make it more real. "I think I'm ending this marriage." Victoria didn't speak. She simply nodded once and reached for her coffee. The divorce filing came on a Tuesday. Quiet, unannounced. Andrew had walked into a downtown law firm alone, dressed in a navy suit without a tie. His expression was somber, not devastated, like someone turning in the keys to a house he no longer called home. The papers were prepared in advance. No drama, no theatrics. Just a signature and a silent exhale when it was done. Sabrina never saw it coming. Not like this. For 2 weeks after the wedding, she had clung to denial with manicured fingers, insisting the media would move on, that a rebrand could fix it. But the world was not waiting for her comeback. Fashion magazines that once featured her now ignored her. Influencer friends stopped tagging her. Sponsorship offers evaporated. PR firms refused to take her calls. And worst of all, Miami's social circles, the ones she once infiltrated with curated charm and ruthless efficiency, froze her out entirely. She was no longer talked about as a rising star. she was remembered as a cautionary tale. Her last public post was a cryptic black and white selfie with a caption that read, "Sometimes people want to see you fail because they never imagined you'd rise." Comments were turned off, then deleted entirely. And then, silence. Back in Brickell, Victoria had no interest in following Sabrina's decline. She wasn't tracking gossip columns or watching follower counts. She was busy. She had a quarterly meeting with the Lane Foundation's new scholarship board. She reviewed a hotel expansion plan in Austin. She personally approved the final interior design for a new luxury spa wing in Charleston. She moved like a woman whose oxygen had returned. On a sunny afternoon at the Alden, she and Gloria stood near the oceanfront pool deck, watching crews install new palm planters and cabanas. 4 weddings booked for next month, Gloria said, handing over a printout. 3 corporate retreats, and an influencer's skincare launch, ironically. Victoria glanced at the bookings list with a faint smile. Publicity still sells rooms. Elena says we haven't had numbers like this since the ribbon cutting, Gloria added. That speech? It practically paid for itself. They walked together slowly past the edge of the terrace, the ocean wind wrapping softly around them like silk scarves. You never said it outright, Gloria murmured. But I know this wasn't just about Sabrina. Victoria turned toward her friend, her voice quiet but clear. It wasn't. You did it for Andrew? I did it for me, Victoria replied. But if he finds himself again in the process, then maybe the cost was worth it. That evening, Victoria returned to her penthouse just before dusk. The condo was warm with the scent of jasmine from the terrace garden. Her heels clicked across the marble floor, echoing in the stillness she had learned to love, not as loneliness, but as freedom. She poured a single glass of wine, set it beside a stack of foundation proposals, and opened her laptop. The Alden's grand ballroom never looked better. Months had passed since the wedding, and yet tonight, it breathed with a different kind of energy. Brighter, warmer, free of pretense. This time, the night belonged to something real. A golden banner hung at the main entrance, the Richard Lane Foundation annual gala. Below it, a string quartet played near the entry garden, their music floating like perfume across the polished courtyard. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with candlelight and laughter, the soft chime of glasses, the rhythm of polished shoes against marble floors. Everywhere, people moved with ease, not curated for perfection, but invited for purpose. Victoria Lane stood just inside the entrance, greeting each guest with grace. She wore a deep emerald gown, simple and sweeping, her only accessory a diamond brooch that once belonged to her mother-in-law. Her hair was pinned back in a classic twist, a style that made no effort to chase trends, and somehow redefine them all the same. Flashes sparked gently from photographers near the floral step and repeat. Press had been invited, not to praise a bride, but to spotlight the foundation's growing influence. Dozens of scholarships awarded, shelters funded, community kitchens expanded across the state. Gloria floated in minutes after the doors opened, dressed in champagne silk and carrying a gold clutch shaped like a rose. She stopped when she reached Victoria, taking in the room. "Look at this," she said, eyes glinting. "It's not just an event, it's a coronation." Victoria smiled. No crowns, just causes. Gloria chuckled. Even better. She leaned in and kissed her cheek. Richard would be proud. Victoria's eyes didn't mist, but something in her chest ached softly at the mention. "I hope so." By 8 p.m., the ballroom was full. Tables dressed in midnight linen surrounded a marble dance floor glowing with soft amber lights. Instead of influencers and minor celebrities, the guest list included philanthropists, educators, small business owners, people who had built things with their hands, their time, their hearts. Elena stood near the back, tablet in hand, headset angled neatly in place, directing staff with her usual quiet authority. Waiters flowed like clockwork. Lighting adjusted itself gently as the evening moved. There wasn't a hiccup. There wasn't even a whisper of one. Victoria passed her a glance across the room. Elena nodded once, subtle, professional, and full of shared satisfaction. Toward the second hour, Andrew arrived. Not as a co-host, not as a lane heir, just as a guest. He wore a charcoal gray suit, perfectly tailored but understated. No date. No entourage. Just a quiet dignity that had taken months to grow into. Victoria saw him enter. She didn't rise from her table, but she didn't look away either. When he reached her, he paused. "You look beautiful," he said. "Thank you," she replied. "I made a donation," he added, "to the Culinary Scholarship Fund, in Dad's name." Victoria's lips curved, gentle and approving. "That's a good place to begin." He didn't stay long at her side, just long enough to show that he understood what the evening was and what it wasn't about. And then he moved on, finding a seat among old family friends, listening, learning. There was humility in the way he carried himself now, a quiet undoing of old habits. As the night progressed, speeches were made. Videos played of scholarship recipients opening acceptance letters. A former hotel intern, now a rising hospitality director in Chicago, stood and spoke with tears in her eyes about how the foundation changed her life. Victoria didn't take the stage. She didn't need to. Her legacy was already in the room, spoken aloud in other people's voices. Near the end of the evening, she slipped away to the second-floor balcony that overlooked the ballroom. It was quiet up there, the music softened by distance, the chandeliers glowing like stars through glass. She stood alone, both hands on the iron railing, watching the celebration below. There was no trace of the woman who once sat, uninvited, at the back of her own story. Now, the story was hers. People laughed, toasted, built connections she had made possible. Gloria stepped beside her a moment later, handing her a coupe glass of champagne. Not bad for someone they tried to keep off the list. Victoria didn't answer right away. She looked down again, at Elena orchestrating service with flawless grace, at Andrew deep in conversation with a nonprofit director, at guests who had once overlooked her, now gathered beneath her roof. Then she turned to Gloria with a faint, knowing smile. "They struck me from the list," she said, lifting her glass slightly. "But I'll always own the guest list." Her inbox was full. Hotel inquiries, donation confirmations, thank you notes from recent scholarship recipients. She answered them one by one, steadily, until the sun disappeared below the skyline, and the only light left was golden and artificial. It was just after 9 p.m. when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, Andrew stood on the other side. No suit this time. Just jeans, a soft button-down, and the expression of someone who had walked a long way, not in distance, but in reckoning. "Hi, Mom." Victoria stepped aside without a word, letting him in. He didn't rush, didn't fill the air with apologies or half-rehearsed explanations. He just walked to the kitchen counter, where the coffee pot sat clean and empty, and ran his hand along the edge of the granite. "I signed the papers this morning," he said. Victoria nodded once. "I know." She didn't even fight it, he added, just stared at them like they belonged to someone else's life. There was a pause. "I wasn't ready to see who she really was," he admitted. "But I see it now." Victoria poured him a glass of water and slid it across the counter. No judgment, no grand pronouncements. "I kept looking for her to love you," she said softly. "But you had to learn what love doesn't look like, too." Andrew's eyes welled, but he blinked the tears away. "I think I need to start over," he said. Victoria gave a faint smile. "Then you're right on time." They sat in the quiet hum of the kitchen, side by side, Not talking about the past, not planning the future, just breathing in the air that once felt heavy and now, finally, felt clean.